So, good afternoon, Lumpong.
Good afternoon.
Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May, and you've kindly agreed to take some questions that have come from people all over the world. Some of them are sending in questions here. So, the first question pertains to these restrictions and lockdown measures that we need to follow in order to avoid spreading coronavirus, to protect ourselves and others. And a lot of people find them difficult, either just mildly annoying and irritating, or are outright rebelling against them. Do you have any advice around that?
Well, it's a very unique situation. The human civilization has never experienced a pandemic of this sort. And there's still a lot to learn, a lot we don't know, how it spreads. There's so many unknown factors involved in it, and just the name coronavirus or COVID-19 that, the governments of various countries feel they must do something to try to control it in some way. And people are trying to do the best they can to stop the spread of this virus, which has quite already taken thousands of lives. So, the thing is that in mindfulness practices, we're aware of, of restrictions on our freedom. When we feel annoyed or rebellious, we're aware that this is how we feel. And this awareness is what I encourage you to trust, not what you're feeling, because it can just be very egotistical, what right, we can think to ourselves, what right does the government have to tell me what to do and prevent me from doing what I want to do. We can have these kind of puerile reactions to orders from above. That's also grist for the mill, when we observe so many of our emotional habits we can trace back to childhood. Even myself, as you grow old, you can see so many emotional reactions to things traced back to early childhood. But the awareness of these reactions is the way to not perpetuate them, not to just suppress or, feel, you want to get rid of them, but to observe them, that they are what they are. They arise and they cease. And you're the awareness, you're the puto, the witness to the presence, to the arising, to the sustaining, to the cessation of various emotional habits that arise. And this is a time, as I've implied before, where there are restrictions made and in a way that I've never experienced in my life, having to be confined or quarantined or, advised not to go to public venues or restaurants or even having to close monasteries is, for most of us, a first-time experience. We've always had open door policies in our monasteries that people are welcome and can visit any time. And then suddenly we have to put closed on the gates and so forth. So that this is, we're adapting to the situation as best we can in order to learn from this pandemic that is affecting us everywhere, every country. There's no safe place to go. There's no country on the planet that doesn't have this problem. So it is unique to the time this time. But it is not an obstacle to enlightenment, to understanding.
In that light, I was talking with some people the other day saying how monks actually enjoy the lockdown, whereas lay people tend to find it difficult to cope with. Why is that?
Well, monks, our life is a meditative one, so being locked down is kind of enjoyable. When suddenly you have plenty of time to be alone and not a lot of duties to perform or obligations to meet or journeys to make, for most of the monks, that's something that we can even enjoy. But for ordinary people, most people, they've never had to experience being locked down. And, with this fear that resonates in us, the fear of death, fear of contagion, and it's such an unknown factor. Who has it and who doesn't? And can you trust your partner, your wife, your husband? Can you trust, even your children, because there's silent carriers and there's infected carriers, and it seems so, and there's so much news, information, rumor about it, that, it does create this sense of going outside the front door of your house, you're stepping into a realm of fear. And so, when most people live a life of distraction, they go to work, they have a routine, they can watch television, they can eat food anytime they want, they can, drink, have beer and wine and so forth, and manage to distract themselves in an ordinary life situation. Go to the pub, go to the nightclub, and enjoy the pleasures of sensuality. But when you're locked in your home, you can only, you 24/7. That means that, there's your whole pattern, your whole lifestyle has been disrupted in a way that you had no intention or no plan for it. And you're not prepared for quarantine or isolation or lockdown. These are words that affect only very few people ordinarily, but in present time, it's affecting everybody everywhere. And so, the advantage of meditation is that you begin to find a stability in yourself, that isn't dependent upon just fulfilling a daily routine and following your habits. Many times you're going, you're observing your habits. You're seeing the ones that aren't beneficial towards yourself or the society you live in. You let go, and so you're not perpetuating bad habits or just distracted mental states by seeking more distraction, but you begin to awaken to the silence, to the sense of solitude, to peacefulness that is natural to us, to consciousness itself. And when we realize this, then there's no need to seek endless distractions through looking at things, through listening to music, through going out and into the world for sensual pleasures, sensual distractions. So for monks, being quarantined for 14 days is kind of a treat, really.
So you talk about how we go out after sense pleasures, distracting ourselves. And so what's the difference between like consciousness as we experience it through the senses and what you refer to as pure consciousness or awareness, or as you just said, the peace and silence inside?
Well, consciousness, there's only one consciousness. So, this is quite important, actually, to recognize that we tend to experience consciousness through our senses, through going out through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, through thinking. We're constantly engaged in consciousness going out to objects, to the world that we believe is our reality. So, when we're conscious, we're very attached to being able to see things, to read, to look at television, to sightsee, to look at pictures and movies and so forth, that we see consciousness as sensory enjoyment or sensory disgust or displeasure. Because, as much as we can see beautiful objects with the eyes, we can also see very ugly, unpleasant things through seeing, through hearing, or smelling, tasting, touching, through thinking. We're a thinking creature. Human beings are creatures that think. So that we have language, we have names for everything. We project our opinions, whether we like something or don't like something, whether something is acceptable or unacceptable. We make value judgments. This is all done through thinking. And so sending consciousness out through the senses, we create the illusions of a very separate self, that consciousness is inside me. It's my consciousness inside my body, as your consciousness is contained within your body. That makes two consciousnesses, or how many 7.5 billion consciousnesses are there through the increase of population, or are dogs and cats and centipedes and scorpions, are they conscious? Are they, they have their own consciousness, like a scorpion has the consciousness of a scorpion, which is contained within its form, or a dog has its own consciousness that is contained within the form of a dog, is how we tend to create the illusions of the world and our relationship to it. But in Dhamma terms, there's only one consciousness, and then in terms of so that we're all united. This is where unity, equality, freedom exists, in the fact that consciousness is unitive. It's not divisive. It's not two. Where the thinking mind is a divisionary function. So it divides in you and me and dogs and scorpions, and so that we give names to different forms that create this sense of division. But in kind of wisdom, the world of wisdom, we're beginning to see that consciousness is universal. It's one. It's unitive. And then when we experience consciousness through the senses, that's sensory consciousness. So it's about feeling. Of sensory conditions are all about feeling pleasure, pain, feeling happy, unhappy, and so forth. So that this is, the sensory world is a divided world of you and me, various opinions and views, political attitudes, prejudices, biases, cultural differences, racial differences, gender differences, all create this sense of division. And that's where the problems arise in our own personal life and our relationships to our family, to our society, or to the world in general, because each one is coming from the conditioned realm of conditioned phenomena, which arises and ceases in consciousness. But once we awaken to pure consciousness that isn't divided, then that is silence, that is peace, that is love, beauty. These kind of exalted states are, they're perfect already in that's the ultimate reality. But the worlds we create, like your own personal sense of self-worth, is a created value system that out of your past, out of the memories of the past, out of how you've been conditioned through your family, through your society, through your culture. So these are condition factors. What we think is conditioned. What we feel is about sensory experiences. This is a sensory form. The human body is a sensitive form in consciousness, rather than consciousness within the form. Consciousness has no form. It has no dimension. It is infinite. It has no boundaries. You can't see it. You can't objectify consciousness and hold it up to witness and prove it to a scientist, because you are conscious. Like you can't see consciousness or objectify it, but you can know it. So in terms of Buddhist terminology, we say santitiko Dhamma, apparent here and now. That the Dhamma is consciousness here and now. That ultimate reality is consciousness here and now. It's not something in the future or that you imagine, or a state that you don't have, that you've got to get something you don't have, but you awaken to the way things are. So the ultimate awakening is being awake to the reality of Santitiko Dhamma, or apparent here and now. It's not a mystery. It's not like hidden away. It's so obvious we don't notice it. Like one metaphor for it is like trying to look at your own eyes, like Ajahn Sumedho can see my eyes, but I can't see my own eyes. They're so close, so here and now, so intimate, that somebody sitting across the room from me can see something I can't see. But is it necessary for eyes to see themselves, because their whole function is seeing? And consciousness, to know itself, to see itself, it takes us, the whole attitude of meditation is to let go of conditioned phenomena, of conditions, phenomena that arise and cease and change, to awaken to our true ultimate reality, to the Dhamma, through recognition. Awareness, aware of itself, is like this, so it's not like it's Santitiko is awakened here and now. It's like this. So it's not something you've got to find and get and control everything to realize, but awaken. So the whole sense of Buddha, the word Buddha means awakened consciousness. So this is important to see that sensory consciousness is one thing. In the five khandhas, in the traditional forms of vipassana, the consciousness is impermanent and not self. So that's sensory consciousness. Because the eyes are impermanent. if we didn't have eyes, we couldn't be conscious of see. There'd be no way to see the world, to name anything in the world. Same with hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. We're born with eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and then, thinking comes later. You're conditioned to think in the language of your parents. And so thinking is an acquired condition after birth. The senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mental states are, what we're born with. The physical, the newborn child has ideally fully equipped with eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. It has feelings, it's sensory, so when it's hungry, it cries, it demands food. When it's, this is before it has language to ask politely for milk, it just has a way of letting the mother know that it needs to be fed. And so this is not programmed by culture, by society. This is natural to the human form. But what we acquire after we're born is language, cultural identity, social identity, religious identity. All our identities are, we identifying with the body, with the gender of the body. Like a newborn baby doesn't think of itself as male or female. But after, we're a few years, we become aware of the differences between the two genders. And so this is acquired knowledge or conditioning, after we're born. So the senses are sensitive. The sense realm is all about feeling, happy, sad, beautiful, ugly, good, bad, true, and false. And this is the realm that we identify with. So it's always in a state of flux and change. It's immutable, and it's mutable, and it doesn't. You can't control it to the degree we want to. We have desires to have permanent happiness, permanent feelings of love and affection, permanent sense of security. These are imagined states that we create around the conditioning of the mind through imagination. You can imagine, being perfectly happy for eternity, but the reality of that ever happening is impossible, because happiness that's dependent upon conditions is impermanent. You can't sustain it. You can't make it permanent. So, you realize that you have to let go of the world that you created, let go of the separate sense of self, of the belief that consciousness is very personal and inside you, when changing your view to we're all inside consciousness. Consciousness is one with everything that arises and ceases in consciousness, including the animal realm, insect realm, trees and flowers. Consciousness is what embraces the totality of existence. And as physical entities, we're creating this sense of separation. So we feel, towards nature, that, nature's something over there. It's a tree, it's a waterfall, it's a mountain, and something separate from ourselves, where these forms that we identify with are actually, part of the changing conditions of nature, of the sankharas changing according to the law of karma. What is born must die, what begins must end. But what we take refuge in, what we awaken to, is not sankharas as identities. We see the futility and the absurdity of continually identifying with the changing conditions that we experience, to recognize consciousness that doesn't change, that is immutable, that is what we can really trust, and also it is the truth of the way things are, rather than just some kind of imagined state that we have to believe in, because you can actually see this for yourself.
In the Buddha's teaching, he talks about the paramis, which are like qualities that one cultivates, develops, and perfects in order to be able to realize the truth of this consciousness here and now, and that's immutable, as you say. Can one make a determination, just on sort of an act of determination to develop these qualities and to have this realization, say, in this lifetime? Or how does one go about cultivating that?
Well, it's skillful to do that. Like in Theravada, they have 10 paramis, and which I can't recite right now. and it's all about karma, about kusala dhamma, apiyagata dhamma. So, I mean, it's like karma is about sankharas, so as long as, you're living in these temporary forms, in these changing forms, these human forms, then to do good, refrain from doing evil. It's just very good advice. And developing paramis as a person, because the personality is very much one that can, is very changeable, very elusive. We want to know who we really are. What is my true nature? You hear these endless complaints about, I don't know who I really am. Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? What race do I belong to? What gender am I truly? Am I a good person or a stupid person? We have all kinds of doubts about ourselves created through the thinking process. And so in thinking in terms of paramis is a skillful way to think, because they're all, developing skillful means in terms of action and speech, to do good, refrain from doing evil, to speak the truth and honestly, and not lie and deceive or insult or curse or create problems with the people we live with. To be, the ideal of the paramis is something to respect and aim for in terms of action and speech. But in terms of meditation, it's getting beyond the paramis. It's actually awakening to ultimate reality, which transcends karma, because karma has to deal with sankharas, with conditions, with phenomena, where consciousness and awakened enlightenment isn't a sankhara, it's ultimate reality. And so it is not karmic. And as we begin to, investigate the reality of our very being, we begin to notice that we are this awareness, this consciousness. This is here and now. It's not something that you develop or get, through a lot of meditation practice. It's something you begin to recognize. realized here and now. And so it's not about time. It's not about finding the right place. You don't have to go to a special holy spot to realize the true nature, to realize ultimate reality. But it's through this awakening, this witnessing of sankharas. By witnessing them, the insight is to let go of them and not to destroy them. It's not about annihilating the samsara or the created world or the sensory forms. It's not an annihilation. It's just the relaxation and the reality of letting go, relinquishing, abandoning, relaxing into ultimate reality, which is here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation. It's not like something that demands to be held as a secret teaching that only a few could possibly understand, but it's to be investigated here and now, leading inward. So you're not seeking distraction or going outward to distract things through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. And you begin to awaken to an inner silence, to a peacefulness that is always present, but we tend to not notice, not see it, because we're always looking far away or trying to distract ourselves through hearing or smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. So proper meditation is practical to investigate reality here and now, not to try to come up with theories or metaphysical concepts about ultimate reality, because there's no mystery to it. It's here and now, and we're in fully. If you ask somebody if they're conscious, they have to say yes, because just being alive, being here, being now is consciousness. So it's not something remote or refined, but something so obvious, so immediate that we tend to, we're conditioned to overlook that by looking for something else or trying to develop conditions that we read about in books or through other teachers and so forth, that we tend to always be going out towards objects rather than looking inward or witnessing the way it is here and now at this place, this time, this place. It's always, wherever we are, wherever is happening, it's always here and it's always now. So the Buddhist teaching is one of, we call ultimate reality, Paramatta Satya, Dhamma. It's called by different names in other religions, but it all, the name is not the important thing. The reality of here and now, of awakeness here and now, is what we're encouraging, whatever name, you're culturally conditioned or religiously conditioned to name it. It doesn't need a name because it's so present, so perfect, that we don't, we begin to let go of this sense of ourself as a vulnerable and separate entity, a human being with flaws and faults and all kinds of emotional problems, and conflicted in society with a dangerous pandemic just waiting outside your front door to attack you. And, we see everything through thinking about it with fear, with this, and fear is a created state. It's not ultimate reality. So your true refuge is ultimate reality, or Dhamma, or consciousness that doesn't begin and end and born. It isn't born and doesn't die.
Last question. Speaking of death, how does one prepare for death?
Well, all I've been saying is a preparation for death, because these bodies are going to die. You know, it's bodies. We know it, don't we? Everybody knows they're going to die, but it's not polite conversation to talk about death because it's what we don't really want to admit. You know, we'd like to. You know, we talk about immortality or eternal happiness when we die. You know, people, would they go to heaven or hell or limbo or some imagined state in between? Are you reborn? Do you believe in reincarnation? And these are belief systems about what happens after the body dies. You know, nobody knows what happens after the body dies because we're experiencing life within a form. But if we begin to be aware of the nature of sankharas, where that a thought, just a simple thought, arises and ceases. It is born and dies, whether you call it begin, arising, ceasing, or birth and death. They all mean the same thing. It has a beginning and an end. And, that's so obviously true. Every thought, that you think comes and goes, and thinking moves very quickly. Can you think about something or hold of an image of a thought for very long? You have to keep repeating like a mantra or a chant, but even then it arises and ceases. So what does it arise and cease into is consciousness. You don't lose consciousness when you stop thinking. You're still fully aware, and thinking arises and ceases rather than depending on thinking to search for refuges of safety or eternal life or to question what happens when you die. Luang Por Chah was very much, encouraging us all to observe the death that goes on all the time in consciousness, in daily life, how things change, how you feel an emotion for a while and then it ceases. So if you're aware of the presence and absence of conditions, like emotions or conditions, love and hate, anger, resentment, jealousy, fear, they all, are phenomena that arise and cease. You can't sustain them. Even though you like the idea of permanent love or permanent happiness is a beautiful ideal. On a sensual level, on a sensory experience level, it can't sustain itself. Because even the idea of perfect love and perfect peace, perfect happiness, arise and cease as concepts. So, ultimately, only bodies die, not, and personalities are dying all the time. They're changing according to whether you're being praised, you receive accolades, you receive Nobel Peace Prize, you become president of the United States, whatever, ultimate success you might have. You can't sustain the happiness that comes from accolades or awards, even the very highest ones, because they're conditions, they're perceptions. And these perceptions, their nature is to be born and die. When you become aware of the deathless, the silence behind the noise, the silence behind the substratum of silence that ever resonates here and now, then you realize only conditions, only what is not self, what is not self are conditions, are phenomena that arise and cease. They born and die. They're being born and dying all the time. Where what doesn't arise and cease, consciousness, here and now, it doesn't ever die. You can't create consciousness through thinking, but you can realize it, recognize it. Awareness, they say awareness aware of itself, is awakened consciousness, enlightenment, seeing the truth of the way it is, not through religious conditioning or beliefs, that you acquire from religious groups, but through your own direct experience, through your own insight into the way things are.